morning, and thank you for joining us for our first podcast. This morning, we're going to have Under Sheriff Nicholson Cluth and Sheriff Tony Spurlock talking about the past, present, and future of the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. Again, I just want to thank you for joining us. This is our first podcast, so it might be a little rough until Kosha and I get a little more comfortable doing this. But I am PIO Lee Kander with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office here in Colorado, and my partner this morning with me is Kosha.
Hi, good morning.
So we're going to go ahead and turn this over to the undersheriff and the sheriff, but we wanted to just kind of give a brief overview, I guess, of why we're doing this. And, you know, at the sheriff's office here, we're always trying to think of new ways to involve the community and communicate with people and, share what we're doing here in the office with our citizens. And so podcasts are kind of one of the newer ways, I guess, of communicating with our citizens, and other agencies are doing it as well. And so we figure we'll give it a shot and try and share some of the things that we're doing here in Douglas County through a podcast.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. I mean, I think the citizens have got a lot of great ideas they can put forward, and we've got great employees that can do the same. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be really good.
Yeah, I think so. So we really want to ask, for your input as well. And if you want to reach out and let us know what it is you'd like to hear from us. We have some good ideas. Sheriff has some good ideas. But we want to hear from you guys as well. And we want to know what it is you'd like to hear from us so that we can continue to give you guys, the information that you need or that you want. So feel free to reach out to us on Facebook and tell us what it is you're looking for, or ask us some questions or whatever. We will respond to all of those, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some future podcasts of some information that you want.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. I mean, I think the citizens or whoever's listening can look forward to things that are funny, educational, maybe, a deep look inside really what an officer goes through, how we're different maybe than just the normal citizen. So it's going to be a good season of podcasts.
Yeah, I think so. So thank you so much for joining us today, and without further ado, we'll turn it over to the sheriff and the undersheriff.
All right, good morning, everyone. Tony Spurlock here, Douglas County Sheriff, at our very first podcast. And, of course, I'm here with Undersheriff Holly Nicholson Cluth. Holly.
Hi there. So excited to be talking to y'all today.
So I'm just going to preface this. This is our first podcast, so we're in the basement of the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, the Justice Center here at 4000 Justice Way, and we've got kind of a cool little thing down here where we have our studio, and it's I'm just going to say it's a little weird.
Yeah,
okay, it's a little difficult. So we have all this technology, and of course the undersheriff's technologically sound. I am not. So we're going to see how this goes. So we're very excited about doing this podcast and really just have an opportunity to share with the community about the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, what happens here. We have a lot of great plans on what we're going to do in the future. So we're just going to kind of do a 30,000-foot level today. So
Yep. Yeah, it's a little bit different having this microphone right in my face, but here we go. We're going to go down memory lane a little bit today. Back to the 1980s. I remember walking in January of 1989 with my French blue uniform, black cowboy boots, and my new perm. So,
and we have photos of that new perm. I know podcasts may not do that, but we might have to break into something new because she truly had fair hair.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Anyway, but you, Tony, you were a gunslinging, shoulder-holstered detective.
That's right, yeah. So I go back to 1980, which we'll get into a little bit of the history of Douglas County and what's happened here over the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. But a lot of neat things that today people might scratch their head, particularly our employees.
Yeah. Population was 50,000 about in 1989. I remember Park Meadows Mall was a mound of dirt that we used to bust four-wheelers trespassing on. That's
right. And now, one of the largest malls that's west of the Mississippi. It is internationally known, and as is Douglas County itself. And so that's what's kind of neat about the past here. I mean, I go back to when I started in 1980. We were in a brand new building at 355 Wilcox Street because the courthouse got burned down, and we were in a little tiny place, and we thought we were in the greatest building ever built.
Now it's a Walgreens.
Now it's a Walgreens. That's right. Yeah. So
Yeah. So we go back quite a ways. I remember being one of the first women on patrol. My supervisor wouldn't assign me down to our southern district because backup was about 10 minutes away at 100 miles an hour. So I always worked up north by the Park Meadows area, busting four-wheelers trespassing.
So yeah, and it's kind of interesting when you talk about women in law enforcement, and I think we may even do a show on that. But when I started in 1980, there were no women deputy sheriffs in the office, none in any of the command structure. We had obviously women employees that worked in dispatch and such, but we've come a long way.
Yeah.
And seeing the change, not even with our community, but just how we have evolved as a law enforcement agency.
Yeah, we have now about 20% of our line staff, our commissioned officers, are women, and about 13% of our supervisors. I think that's probably more than the majority of the standard nation split.
Yeah. So a fun little thing is, so we had a locker room at 355 Wilcox Street that was a men's locker room, and the women's locker room was a bathroom. And because it wasn't designed. People weren't thinking about that in those days.
Yep.
And we had to put lockers in there and knock out a wall later as we hired more women officers. But when you think about how the world thought in those days,
there wouldn't be women on patrol.
There would not be.
Yeah. And I another funny story. I remember opening the shotgun closet for the first time and grabbing my shotgun, and there was a life-size poster of a woman in a bikini with a shotgun in her hand. That didn't stick around too long. So
no, and we've had some wonderful officers come through this agency over the years, and what pops to my mind is Judy Macy. We knew her as Judy Stapleton. God rest her soul. She passed about a year or so ago, but worked here as a sergeant in investigations on the street. Was a crime scene technician, and when you start looking back at the history of everyone, she was a train engineer, and she was so fun to work with. I worked surveillance with her on a couple occasions, and usually it's pretty boring working surveillance, but she could tell you everything that you wanted to know about a train. And so you think back on all of the people, and she came into my mind this morning for some reason.
Yeah. Well, you probably needed to mention her today.
Yes.
So a lot of history, back then in the 80s, we typically only had about 3 officers on. Usually there was a sergeant, one on the east side of the county and one on the west side of the county. And that was kind of a challenge because, again, backup was a long way away. I remember I was your corporal on patrol for a while, and you made me do all your work. But at this point, nothing's changed.
And we're doing the same thing now. The undersheriff does all of my work. Yeah, I'm impressed that you can remember back that way. When they said we're going to do this podcast, we're going to start and we're going to talk about the history of Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and I'm thinking, well, I've been here 40 years. That's a lot to remember back to.
No kidding.
I would actually need a bunch of coffee and some pastries and some prodding of people to remind me of what happened.
That's why I called you last night to tell you, try to think of some stuff.
I thank you for that. It has been a lot of change over the years. And you think about when I started, we had 30 employees. That was including all of our volunteers, everyone, 30 people. We have almost 800, 776, and counting our volunteers today. And we had 30,000, you mentioned the population when you started, 30,000 when I started, and we're at 358,000 in the county right now. Yeah. And, we serve the unincorporated portion, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we serve 216,000, almost 217,000 people in the unincorporated area. And when we have the show, and again, this is our starter show, so there's a lot of ideas, talk about all the duties of the office of sheriff, which I find fascinating, not only being a deputy sheriff for 30 some years, but being the sheriff, the 33rd sheriff of Douglas County. I think we can have some really great conversation about what really is about the sheriff across the state of Colorado, and what our duties are, and what our responsibilities are.
So, back in the 80s, we had one person in the county that I recall that had a mental health issue. Now, obviously, that's an epidemic in Douglas County and all over the nation.
Yeah, and we are striving constantly. We have a CIT training with all of our deputies. We have a community response team, and just this last week, I was given the pleasure of giving the award to Barbara Drake, the Douglas County Deputy County Manager, from Colorado Mental Health organization, as being the individual of the year. And what was really cool about that is last year I was a recipient of that award, and I was able to give it to her this year. And we talked about the almost 2,000 mental health calls that we've gone to all over the past 2 years, 1,000 just this last year. And compared to where our county has grown, and really just the changing dynamics of our world, and how we deal with and what we've developed to really serve the citizens of Douglas County.
Yep, it's a great program. And back in the 80s, we had a car, we had a gun, and we had a pen. Things have changed a lot in policing. Now we have body cameras, car cameras, license plate readers, computers in cars. Think about what you would have thought of some type of a device, now called a taser, that would have stopped someone in their tracks if you shot it to them, but didn't injure them.
So, I'm old enough to know that I watched the old TV shows, with Star Trek.
Star Wars,
that.
I was thinking the same thing.
Exactly, and I think that we're at that point now. And when you think about interesting things, when I was a patrol deputy, and you talked about a pen, and we hand wrote our police reports.
Yep.
Today, if you asked a deputy sheriff to handwrite a police report, they would look at you in a state of amazement.
What?
I took a patrol car out 2 weeks ago and just drove around the northern part of Douglas County, really from Chatfield over to Parker. And I was amazed of a number of things, how difficult it is to get around this county in a police car. But more importantly, just the cockpit of a police car, all the equipment that's inside the car. And here's just a little fun thing. I drive an unmarked car all the time. When you're driving a marked car, you have to drive the doggone speed limit and abide by all of the rules and regulations.
You are being watched.
You're being watched. And I got to tell you, you kind of remember your driving skills. And I have to give the undersheriff, heck, I was following her the other day on a call, and she was like driving like Grandma Moses or something. I don't know what the deal was. And then I remembered that we were in,
unmarked cars. People weren't pulling over for me.
People weren't pulling over, yeah.
So technology's really, although it's given the tools to the criminals in some respects, law enforcement really has harnessed the boundless ways we can track, reveal, combat crime, as well as to protect and inform and educate the public, and we're big on that here, educating the public.
We are, and one of the things we just did the other day was to do a kind of a presentation on this thing's called license plate reader. We call it LPR, and what an awesome piece of technology that we have today that we can, and it focuses on, unfortunately, if you get your car stolen, and we, just a quick little note, we're down 30% in our auto thefts in the Highlands Ranch area alone in this last half of the year, or the first part of this year from last year. But this technology is so cool that we set it up, and it looks for cars that have been registered or listed through law enforcement as stolen, and it alerts the officer, the closest officer there, through our computer system, our MDT system, that, hey, this car is stolen, and in many cases we can get photographs of that car because, however, it's uploaded into the system. not anything that we did in the old days.
No.
You asked dispatch to clear a plate. 15 minutes later, you might have gotten it, and by that time, you've let the guy go. So now you're speeding across the county to try to find them.
Yep.
In a stolen car, and I had that happen to me a number of times. So
Yep.
the change in our world is definitely
Absolutely
interesting.
It's making a difference. We can really protect the citizens and their property with this new technology. And you know what? The bad guys aren't coming here to steal cars as much.
No, they're not. And I heard from our detectives the other day that they were doing an interview with some folks that were apprehended, and they mentioned the fact, we try not to go to Douglas County because we'll catch you. We have, as they call it, magical technology down here. Just so everyone else is listening, those other agencies have it too.
Yeah.
But people are paying attention. The criminals are paying attention to the fact that we have resource available to us, and we will investigate those, and we have the ability and the technology to snatch them up.
Yep.
And if they're coming down here and stealing your car, we're going to snatch them up.
Yep. And it really is all, nowadays it's about prevention, it's about education, community partnerships, huge here, our volunteers. And another thing, safety, wellness, resiliency for our officers, really focusing on that now, and trying to make them be better officers mentally and physically.
We just left a meeting this morning. We have some wonderful employees that are constantly looking for ways to not only help the employee, but the employee's family understand this new phenomenon that they're falling themselves into in this new career of law enforcement. When I started, they didn't even, your spouse wasn't even like, you don't bring your spouse to the office. Are you crazy? What are you? You don't do that. And spouses were really not encouraged to be involved in your career. They weren't encouraged to be a part of anything. And of course, and these were, as you know, it was predominantly an all-male law enforcement agency. So when we'd have Christmas parties, was the only time that we would actually see anyone's spouse. Yeah. And now, we used to be turned, because I'm old school. It's like, well, bring your wife.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now as the undersheriff said, we have a lot of women employees here, and we've had to evolve and make it to where we can provide resources for them and their families and their children, so they understand what the officers doing 24 hours a day and doing tours. And I remember our old jail at 355 Wilcox Street. If you worked in dispatch and the jail was busy, then you'd have to feed them.
Yeah.
And we remember we used to feed them TV dinners. Okay. And so you were like, you wanted to work the shift where you got the chicken, mashed potato, and gravy TV dinner.
Not the macaroni and cheese and apples.
Not macaroni and cheese and apples. That's nasty. And so you were like, that was the highlight of our day. Okay. In our kitchen today, we have a nutritionist on that is employed. We make our food here.
Serves 1,000 meals a day.
Makes 1,000 meals a day, and you can actually come down here and eat this meal, and it's like the stuff that you would have.
Halfway decent.
Yeah.
So what hasn't changed in 30 years? Well, Douglas County is still a fabulous place to live. It's got good schools, low crime rate, beautiful open space, and of course, great law enforcement.
Of course, and I want to just say I want to thank the undersheriff for being part of this project and saying this is something we really want to do. Our community relations crew, Jeff and Jason doing a great job. Our PIOs really making a difference to where. How do we reach the community? And I encourage you, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I guarantee it. I'm going to make them nervous because this might be something that gets cut, and you guys never even get to hear this. But I hope that you respond to us and give us some insight, give us some questions. Hey, what about this or what about that? And throw some ideas. What would you like to hear from us? We have a ton of ideas on how we want to share with you. Just real quickly, keep in mind that we have 5 divisions in this office. And that's a lot of things that we do as the sheriff. There's a lot of things that we touch as a law enforcement agencies with our partners here and just locally in Douglas County. And so we're really excited that we'll be able to put something together here, be able to tell some fun stories. There's another really cool, I have a face for radio, so this is perfect, okay? But the undersheriff, on the other hand, there's an awesome photograph, and maybe when the time comes, we get to put some photographs up of her holding a pygmy pig, or what was the kind of pig was that?
It was
how
one
did
of
that
these.
come about? I just have
Somebody
to ask.
convinced me that they were great pets, and so I took that pig on. And no, potbelly pigs are not
Potbelly
good
pig.
pets.
There we go.
But it seemed fitting for a law enforcement officer at the time. You know?
And we have that photograph on the wall, and that was either a late '80s or early '90s photo of.
Still had a perm.
And she still had the big perm. Yeah, big hair was cool then. Nowadays, you have to have it pulled back and short hair and no hairspray, I guess. I don't know that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to talk about that
I don't
kind
have
of
to talk
stuff.
about those kinds of things. Yeah. So.
All right.
But it is a different world. So we're excited to share with you a lot of different things. So thank you all for listening.
Been fun.
And we will we'll give you a whole bunch of more information. But please respond back to us, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye.
All right, Lauren, that was great. Thanks so much for the sheriff and undersheriff for coming on. Great stories. Really appreciate it. I think the listeners learned a lot of different things about the county as well as the undersheriff and sheriff today. Lauren, what did you think?
Yeah, I always love hearing the old stories from the sheriff and the undersheriff and kind of their experiences and things that we don't get to see here.
Absolutely. I think
now,
they did a great job. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was great.
Thanks so much, guys, and we look forward to having you listen on our next show.